family. And so I decided to look for a sperm donor, and I found an anonymous but open sperm donor online, and decided I wanted to get pregnant. Found a doctor who I could go to, and basically had sperm shipped over to the doctor's office, and drove over there and got inseminated, and drove back and thought, wow, I'm probably getting pregnant right now as I'm driving back. And sure enough, I was pregnant, and I gave birth to a son 9 months later.
How old were you, Sonali?
I was 39 when I gave birth,
Okay.
and my son is now 9.5. So
Oh, okay.
you can do the math.
That math is not important. The one that is important, in fact, I mean, the question that's important is that, was it an overwhelming urge for you to become a parent, or was it just, something like you said, you hadn't planned for it? So where did the thought come from? Do you know, or was it just something that you decided I need to do?
Well, I think for me, I didn't have, my mother died when I was 25. She was my only parent. I was raised by a single parent. My mother got divorced in the 70s in India, and she claims she was the 12th woman in India to get divorced. I don't know how true that
Oh,
is, but um, I think for me, I just felt like I wanted my own family, and I had this sort of chosen family in terms of the queer community, but I didn't feel like I had this family unit. And so I think it was in part that, but I also really loved the company of children. Like I had spent time as a young adult being around children, and so it was just this desire to want to have a child and be a parent. And even though I'm a lesbian, I thought there are ways in which I can do it. I'd met other lesbians who had been parents before me, who are also South Asian, and they shared with me how they did it. And I decided I wanted to do that too.
fabulous. Aditya, what was your parenting story like, and anything you'd like to tell us about your other, any other your story from before that?
Well, I became a father at the age of 49, and I had already been with my partner Michael for, I would say, 20 years at that time. And when I came out at the age of 26, my mother, who was a very supportive person, totally accepted me. But what she said was, well, that's very sad because you would be such a good father and you would be such a good husband and a good father. At that time, I wasn't with Michael. And then later, a year later, I met him. I brought him to India in 1993. And then she suggested I marry him. She said, you should marry him if you like him. And so, at her prompting, we got married. We had a Hindu ceremony in Delhi in 1993 in my parents' drawing room. And then we were together and we had a full life, Michael and I. We went on holidays, we bought a house. This is back in California where I lived at that time. And I met him there also. And so there we had a lovely house and a garden, and we both love gardening and watching movies and having friends. But it never felt complete. I had a lovely career growing. It was very full, and I had wonderful projects. And when you don't have children, you devote yourself to your profession. And I did that fully, and I loved it. And my staff, people in my office were my children. I'm an instinctive mother, I would say. And so I, I had a need to have children. I felt almost when I met Michael at the age of 28, first thing I asked him in the first week was, will you have my children? At that time it wasn't even a thought. And then he said, is that what you want? And I said, yeah, I had not thought about it, but it came out of my mouth. And then later, when I was about 35, actually, I never thought I would have children, but I was in I was in a Pilates class, funnily enough, and one of the ladies approached me one evening. She said she wants to come and visit me, and she came home and she said, "Well, could you give me your sperm? I want to have a child." She was a single woman, straight woman. I would have a child. And I said, well, why did you choose me? She said, well, I saw you dancing at the party and you danced beautifully. I was like, well, that's one way to choose. And so she put the thought in my head, and she said, you could be a father or an uncle, whatever you want. But with
Right.
her, I didn't really connect, in the sense we didn't have the same values. She was a little more conservative than me, and I thought it'd be complicated. After that, what happened was, many times we saw, other people approached me, various lesbian couples. We never kind of gelled with anyone. And then a few years later, this gay couple friend of ours, they had children, and I didn't even know you could do it through surrogacy. And I said, how do you have children? They said, well, we are having them through this new process, IVF, surrogacy. And so they said, come in. I was loved holding the babies and being with them. And then another couple had children, and I thought about it, but it seemed still too complicated. And so that was going on. And then many years later, fast forward to about 2010, my father was very ill. So I started coming to India a lot. And I was sitting by his bedside. He was ill, and all I did was read the newspaper. And I read that, it was very easy to do surrogacy in India. So I brought it up with my family. And my mother said, you're too old. I said, no, I'm not old. I feel young. And my brother said, well, you know how much work it is. You know how it's very difficult to bring up children. I said, I am prepared to do the work. And I said, well, it's very expensive. And he said, it's not a financial decision. If you want to have kids, you should do it. And so my mom said, well, if you're going to regret it either way. She said, if you don't have children, you'll regret it. If you have them, you'll regret it. And she was very kind of, she'd like to make a joke out of everything, my mom. And so she said, you should do it. So she said, I'll take you to the right person. I said, how do you know? She said, this is the doctor I know. I'll take you to meet him. And she knew a surrogacy doctor in Bengali market. And right where I used to buy my school textbooks, I went to modern school. Right opposite that was the IVF surrogate clinic. I went and met him. And he said, of course, I'll help you. You're like my brother. And because he grew up in number 2 Sundarnagar market, I grew up in number 6. He said, we grew up together. And my mother had kept up with him. And so he said, you gay people would be wonderful parents. I said, why is that? He said, you really want the child and you're full of love. And, you'll be very wonderful. He said, I know you'll be a wonderful father. And so I'm going to help you. And so he helped me and his wonderful wife, Dr. Alka Gupta. This was Dr. Anoop Gupta and his wife, Alka Gupta. They just arranged it all. They found the surrogate and they did the IVF process. And, a few months later, maybe 10, 12 months later, we had a child, 2 children.
2 children, yeah, twins.
Twins,
Right.
yeah. Amrita and Shiv. Their names are Amrita and Shiv.
Oh, wonderful. What the one common aspect in both your stories is that you really wanted that child. You wanted that child to make you feel complete, or whatever it was, that sense of a family. And that's the right reason. And I mean, it's just probably what one should do. And I know so many heterosexual couples who are having children for the wrong reasons. So I guess there's already a heads up in that sense. We were talking earlier about, guitar classes and coding classes. I think as a parent, everybody's worries and concerns are pretty much the same, regardless of age, marital status, gender identity, sexual oriented, what have you. All those people who want a child or who have a child already are just wondering, am I or will I be a good parent? And there's a lifetime of endless worries. But I know that you have to deal with some extra concerns, some extra worries, especially with respect to prejudice and discrimination. So I thought, let's just talk a little bit about that to, get the ground reality as to what is actually happening in your lives beyond the regular worries of a parent. Aditya, let's start with you.
Well, when we had children, I was, as I said, doing very well in my career in America, and it was a very hard decision to make. But I decided I would leave America at that moment, come to India. And Michael and I were complete agreement about this, because we feel that India is a family-oriented culture, and there's a lot of family supportive environment here. And actually that has proved to be right. I think, I wanted the kids to grow up with Indian values, which are mostly family oriented values. And I felt that I would get the support necessary, my brothers nearby, etc. I wanted them to grow up more in like a village setting. So, in answer to your question, what I found was that because India is so family oriented, there's no reaction to us being a gay couple. They react to the children who are ultra sweet. And so what they do is there's not like been an issue about us ever being a gay couple. I mean, I found it quite interesting that people just
That's
take us
great.
as a family. Yeah, and there's like everyone, we are a totally out couple. And so the dhobi, the drivers, everyone knows, that we are a gay couple and these are our children, and they all accept us, and it's all, it's like, it's not like an issue. Like I haven't faced prejudice that way. I do make sure I do when I go the school year, at the beginning of the school year, I meet their teacher. We both go,
Okay.
Michael and I, like all parents meet the teacher, and I explain to them this is a special family, and please don't use the word mother or father in the classroom. You can use gender neutral terms like parent, and
Parent.
so don't focus. What does your mother do? What does your father do? And they said we are older parents because it took us a while to get here. That's maybe the unique thing about us, but I think otherwise they understand completely, the parents, and I mean the teachers, and they're very friendly. And all the kids, other kids' parents are very lovely and friendly, and we have a nice community with them. And the teachers understand that we come from a special family, and the kids understand that too. So if anyone asks them, "Who's your mother? Who gave you birth?" They say, "We were born through surrogacy, and we have two dads." It's as simple
Oh,
as that.
that's great. That's obviously a lot of open communication from the beginning, from your end too. That
Right.
helps. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, Nali, were your experiences different?
Mine were very similar with Aditya's. I have to say that I too was very open about my communication with my child, and I told him when he was very young about how he was conceived. I explained it. It was, in some ways, I felt so lucky because, I understand that heterosexual parents always hesitating about how they conceived a child and they don't talk about certain things. But for me, it was actually really easy. I just had to be like, well, I went to the doctor and the doctor put sperm in my body, and then you were the size of a peanut, and then you grew into the size of a lemon. And like, I could like I would tell him these bedtime stories about how, and he would love it. He would ask me to repeat that same story of how he was conceived, and he would, sometimes I would miss a certain fruit and he'd say, well, then I became a watermelon. And like, he would tell the story himself about how he was conceived. And in fact, last year when he was in second grade, he had a classmate who said, "Oh, Rohan, you don't have a dad." Like, how I thought, she was this young kid was having a sibling in her family. Her mother was pregnant, and she said, "I thought you have to have a mother and a father for to make a baby." And he said, "Oh, you don't. You just need a sperm donor." And all these children in the class were like, "What's a sperm donor?" And so I think the teacher panicked a little bit because she didn't know how much Rohan knows. And so she took on and she said, well, Rohan's mother is a lesbian, and she got a sperm donor and she borrowed. And she said, I'm so sorry, Sonali, I used the term borrowed because obviously you're not returning this sperm, but I was in such a panic mode to explain to these children. And so these second grade children learned that Rohan is was born through a sperm donor, and it's very sort of normalized, and I don't know. I think I think we as adults sometimes assume that it's going to be harder and that there will be prejudice that we'll face. I come back to Delhi every summer, and I'm also out. Like I've had people ask me questions, like the nannies who'll ask and say, "Saab kahan hai?" And I'm like, "Saab nahi hai," and I'll explain to them, and there are times it's been sort of interesting. I've explained like how I've gotten pregnant, and people will say, हाँ मैंने सुना है, like this is how it happens. अमेरिका में ऐसे pregnant होते हैं. And then there are some who look at me questioningly. I remember I met these two young women who worked, one younger woman and an older woman who worked in this house where I was staying, and the younger one was like pretty like open and understanding that there is the possibility of you getting pregnant that way, and the older woman was like looking at me a little questioningly, like I'm making up some story, like yeah, like I think she just thought that I had a one night stand, or I was very promiscuous and I was coming up with this cock and bull story about how I got pregnant. But yeah, it's been really nice, and both
Yeah.
in India and in the US uh, to be around people who are loving and accepting and really sort of embracing the children, you know. And I think also it helps because both Aditya and I have we, you know, our children have met each other. Our children have read books about different kinds of families,
Families.
and I know personally, you know, parents, a lesbian couple in Bombay who have kids, um, and Aditya and Michael in Delhi, like, and Rohan has met a lot of families here in the US where parents they have two moms or two dads, and
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. One
So,
one should just say. I'd like to say that in the U.S. it's very common now.
yeah.
I think what firstly, gay couples are openly gay in America a lot more than they are in India, and I think
Sure.
about 20% of the gay couples in America have children. So if you go to the supermarket, you see gay families all around, everywhere in the America and the West. You're beginning to see families in India also. Hopefully we will legalize gay marriage, and then people
Yeah.
will start growing their families. It's a natural human urge to have a family. It's just like a
For
need, like
sure.
everyone else wants to nest and have their little children. I mean, it's just like it's the same thing. And so you will find that eventually, my hope is in India it will become like a more of a norm. And as Sonali is saying, there are people in India. I know two other couples now in Delhi who've had kids, who are gay couples who've had kids, and so it's happening all over the world. And of course, we
Right.
got to get with the times.
For sure, absolutely. So, Nani, in fact, just a comparison. I was watching your film, a brilliant film, and I'd like to tell all our viewers that at least this is the one that I've seen, and I'm sure all your work is as outstanding. I Am. And you have basically, it's a story about you and your mom, but you have followed the circumstances, the way things are, the whole situation, as far as also people's perspectives towards homosexuality, so beautifully in that film. So when you're talking to somebody and she says, ladies kaise shaadi kar sakti hain, from that day and 10 years hence today, do you see that we in India have changed mindsets, perspectives? Are we ready for family diversity now, a little more than we were, say, a decade ago?
I mean, you know, Aditya will testify to this. He says that, you know, his mother uh, insisted that him and Michael get married in 1993, and that's
1993, that's
yeah.
fabulous, absolutely.
So, you know, it's I think changes take place slowly, and I think, and gradually, and I think individuals, and there are a lot of individuals themselves who are very accepting of their children. In fact, I met Aditya through his mother, because I met Aditya's mother and I were on a TV show in Delhi, and she was talking about having a gay son, and I was talking about struggling to come out to my mother. And uh, I mean, I think laws change, and then it takes a longer time for societies to really catch up with it. I mean,
Right.
here in the US, you know, they have civil rights laws that were passed in 1954, and people are still fighting and for those laws to be enforced. And I think mindsets follow, and I think we assume sometimes that uh, people are close-minded, but I think there are there are large group of parents of gay and lesbian families in India. There are groups, official groups in Bombay and even
Yeah.
smaller parts, smaller cities like Baroda and um, Vadodara, where parents are coming together to talk about these issues and talking about having LGBTQ children. Um, and so I think it definitely helps. The media has been sensitized. A lot of work went into that. There was a time when uh, people in the media were talking about LGBTQ families in a very different way than we are right now, for instance.
Right, right. Absolutely, you're right. That of course, change does take time, takes its own course. We spoke about, what is the perception from the outside world. What about within the house? What are your children talking about? What kind of questions are you asking? Are they asking you? They are very sensitive, very perceptive. So, if there's any kind of teasing or mean comments, did you have to prepare your children for potential bullying or teasing or anything in school? Is life confusing for them at all? I know you've answered that in some way because your children seem to have clarified it to your teacher better than the teacher would have been able to handle it. But yeah, what kind of questions do they have for you? Sonali, we can start with you.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think my child sometimes is much more out and open about me than I sometimes feel comfortable. I remember we were in London a few years ago, and the taxi driver was having this conversation with us, and he was asking about my husband. He assumed just because I was with a child, and Rohan just piped in and was like, "My mother doesn't have a husband; she's a lesbian." And I was like, "Oh, I hadn't, I under normal circumstances, I wouldn't really have felt safe coming out to a random taxi driver, but he was just so forthcoming, um, and sometimes he'll say things like, I remember a few years ago, someone commented and said, "Oh my gosh, Rohan has grown so tall." You know how often uncles and aunties will comment that about your child. It's such a common thing to say. "Oh my gosh, you've grown so big,"
Yeah, yeah.
and Rohan just turned to me and he goes, "Tell them how big the sperm was." And I said, "What?" And I think what he meant was how tall the sperm donor is, because I've told Rohan that the donor is 6 feet 5 inches tall. And so he just was like, telling me to tell this family about how it's the reason why he's tall. And so I think he's very
Yeah,
he's much more at ease and forthcoming about it, and that I think it really helps me to think about that
yeah,
as well. And there's a certain comfort. I mean, I think if once you normalize it and you talk about it so openly. But he challenges people too. Like, he had a friend in his class who said, "Oh, uh, boys don't wear dresses," and he was like, "Why not? Clothes are just clothes. Anybody can wear anything." And he he was like, "Find me a dress. I want to wear a dress and to school tomorrow." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "I just want people to know that clothes are clothes and anybody can wear anything." And so I think in some ways he's changing the world, and making people ask questions, think about it, and like, yeah, that's true. Clothes are clothes and anybody can wear anything. Girls can wear pants to school, so why can't boys wear dresses? What's the big deal?
yeah, absolutely. I love that. Aditya, your experiences, your children's experiences and questions actually.
Well, I had anxiety about, that they won't have the love of a mother. Of course, that's a hallowed subject in India, of course, all over the world. Nothing can
Ma.
equal the love of a mother. Ma, ma, ma. Our country is based on ma. And I did feel like inside a little bit that inko, like someone said, inko maa ki mamta aur dular kaun deta hai? So I said, I do. And because, and then when they were small, they didn't know who their mother was. They had a number of nannies. We had
Right.
a cook and two nannies because there were two kids. So there were a lot of women. I wanted them to have a lot of women in the house. And so, um, so they could be around women too. We are a two-man household. It would be nice the opportunity for them to be cuddled by women and held, and know the love of women also. Like I love my mother, and I felt, oh, I got this love for my mother that's unequaled, and how will I pass it on to them? And then I realized that I have it in me. And so one day they asked me when they were about, I would say, two, or when they learned to speak, 2.5 or something. They said, my daughter said, "Who's my mommy?" And it just came out of my mouth. I said, "I am." And so they said, "We can call you mom." I said, "Sure, you can call me mom." And the little boy came up and said, he came like, "Can I call you mom?" I said, "Yeah."
Oh,
So they called me mama forever. And what they did was similar to Rohan. They out me all the time. Like we're sitting in the swimming pool for, you know, um, in the kids' pool. I spent 5 years in the little wading pool for with the kids till they could, or maybe 3 years till they could go into the adult pool at the golf club. And they would they would make sure. I thought Amrita was doing this. She would make sure, she would say, "Mama, Mama." She would always, in public, they make sure they address me as Mama. And and so I felt, like, but it doesn't matter to me because I love the name. And I think,
yeah.
how what's it like to me, it's an honorific. It's like it's like something is like beautiful, to be called mother. And I don't mind it at all. It doesn't hurt my masculinity at all to be called mama. And I'm not that, like, fragile.
Right.
And I explained to them. Sonali got us some lovely books. I explained to them that we were a special family, and if anyone asks, they can explain it that way. And there are different types of families in the world. And I've explained to them about prejudice and discrimination because they need to know. And in fact, I went to their school and told about the civil rights movement in America and our freedom struggle. No one was teaching them this. They asked me to teach about America. I said, I'm going to teach them "We Shall Overcome." And so they said, "Oh, wow, now the school is singing it." The whole class through Zoom, we all got together and I taught them the civil rights songs, and I told them about the civil rights movement and how Martin Luther King was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, and how it went, and how the British came and robbed us of our dignity. And so all these things are connected. The discrimination we face is something that was gifted to us by the British, in a way, to the whole world, and anti-homosexual feelings and thoughts. And India wasn't like that. So I kind of linked the idea of discrimination in their mind. So I want them to be champions of freedom and champions of anti-discrimination. And so they need to understand this. It's, that the world can be changed. And as they will be the ambassadors. You see, the thing is, why it's
Oh,
important for
absolutely.
gay people to have families is we need our children to change the world. We've tried our best by coming out, and we will do that. We have to be open as we can. Not every gay person can be out. It depends on your circumstances, of course. But the ones who can come out do come out. And then if we have children, what will happen is the world will change. It kind of these are the seeds of change. The children are, and they will understand. The world will understand from our children that we are just like everyone else, which we are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Of
our
course.
parents, and changing the subject a little bit, I think what our parents need to do, your viewers are mothers. I
Yes.
want to address them. I want to tell them your children might be gay. Your children, your brothers, your maybe even your father and your mother and your sisters, you have no idea because they haven't come out. And so be very aware. People think we don't know any gay people. That's a laugh. Our families worldwide have gay people in them. And your children might be gay. Mothers, your children might be gay. Be comfortable, be nice to them. Love them like your children are. Don't be prejudiced against your own children. Do what a mother should do, is give them unconditional love. And if they ever tell you that you're gay, your mother's role is to give them unconditional love and support, like my mother gave me. And so I think that is my message to your viewers, is that, we are gay people, Sonali and I, sitting here we faced, well, courage. We had to pull our
Yes.
courage together to come here, to be out in the world and all that. But what happens is little gay children are so tender. They're so
Right.
tender, and the world is so cruel. And who is going to protect them? is the mother, the father. That's their role. And so, we are having children, we are having our families because we wanted to. But the bigger question is, why doesn't society love its gay population? And why are we so keen to hate the gay population for no reason at all? We haven't done anything. We are loving people generally, like human beings. There's some
Absolutely.
bad gay people also, but but generally we're just like any human being. And so the mothers should really be sensitive. If the boy wants to wear dresses, he should be allowed to. My mother, I played with dolls when I was a kid. I wish I'd played more sports. I one day said to my mother, when I was grown up, I said, I wish you had pushed me to go to the playground, play more sports. I'd have a stronger body. She said, you didn't want to. You wanted to play with dolls. Why would I force you to do something you didn't want to do? So, people have children and the fathers get very ashamed of their effeminate sons
Yeah.
or of their tomboyish daughters, force them into marriages, lives of unhappiness. This is our society, forcing our children to do things they don't really want to do, making their lives miserable forever. So this is not right.
Absolutely. And I think most of this comes from ignorance. All this prejudice and all this hatred is coming. Why? Because you don't know better. And which is why conversations like this are important. And a small way, if we can touch as many families as possible, and with a message like what you just gave, Aditya, I think that's an important message, that you don't know what your family members are going through. You don't know. Maybe they haven't been able to resolve it themselves. That is a huge part of the of coming out, right? I mean, the internal resolution is also a part of it. So
It's it's very
absolutely, I think
difficult. A lot of women, moms here on this show may have gay husbands, and
yeah,
why they got married to, why did the gay man marry them? It may be, and there may be lesbians in your show also watching this,
sure,
who were
sure,
married against their will. And so now they have families, they're happy with their families. They have to further wherever they are in that situation then and be happy with it. Because life, you should be happy with your situation. But the thing is, if your husband turns out to be gay, have compassion. If your child is gay, have compassion. You have to move through the world with an attitude of compassion. And what is going on right now is we are too concerned with log kya kahenge. What
yeah,
is society going to say? Well, pardon my language, screw that. First be comforting towards
comforting,
your family and your child more, because you see, we grow up, I can't even explain to you what we go through as gay children. We grow up knowing we're different. We feel a lot of fear that our family will reject us. And that is the last thing your family should ever do. But we go through, and a lot of families do reject their children for just being gay. It's the most silly thing ever. But we go through that fear, and the child going through that fear. It's one thing to face rejection or fear it when you're adult and you're kind of strong. But if you're a tender child and to start feeling at the age of 10 or 9, when you start thinking, oh, I'm different, that your family will reject you, that your mother will reject you, that fear instills into you and becomes so terrible, instilled such unhappiness. I had a terrible unhappy childhood, all the way through my teens up into my 20s. And my mother said, when I came out to her, she said, you should have told us earlier. Why didn't you tell us you were carrying this burden on your own?
burden.
And she could come and give us a hug. And I was weeping away. You should have told us. So my mother was unusual. I wish more people were like her. But I think people can be. They should understand that
Yeah,
if my child ever says to me, Mom, I'm gay, and then give them the support to allow it. If you see they have a boyfriend hanging around, a guy is a boyfriend, girl is a boyfriend, be sensitive to the fact. And often the sisters and brothers, to be nasty to their brother, to their siblings,
sibling.
out them to the mother, and then the mother and parents have a bad reaction. Well, don't, it doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter at all if the child is gay. The person has to be happy. They have to have a
Yeah,
good career. They should be happy. They should be good people. That's what you want your children to be, good people, not whether they're
absolutely.
straight or gay. Yeah, so that's what life is about.
And in fact, by building these kind of stresses and prejudices and all, we are hampering productivity of a large population, of a large productive population who
Forget
are just
productivity, forget
yeah,
productivity,
creativity.
the rate of
Yes, yes,
suicide
absolutely. Yeah,
amongst gay kids is so high. because they feel they will be rejected by society, and it is very sad. I don't know
So,
what
I
to
mean, there's
say.
an emotional cost, there's an economic cost, there's just cost. There's just only cost
And the
attached to the
economic cause is
prejudices
to
that
the
we have.
family. You see, you raise a child, the child in India especially, or whatever family, the child is an economic asset. And also an emotional asset. You raise a child because the child will help you, and you help the child, and the child helps you. That's what family is. They help each other. To raise a child and then say, you're not good enough for me because you're gay is so bizarre.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree. And I think, Aditya, you say it so beautifully because, and I think it's really important because I remember when I was making this film and I met Aditya's mother, one of the things she said was that if you stand up for your child, people say, log kya kahenge and what will society say? We have to show that we are also part of society. If we as parents stand up and say, I have a gay son and I'm okay with it, then nobody else can say anything. You're in some ways protecting your children by standing up and saying, it's fine, I'm okay with it, so what's the problem? And then people are like, oh yeah, I what can I say, and so in some ways I think we as parents, when we stand up for our children, we are actually providing that sort of support that people can't say anything, and I think that is really, really important. And I think, Aditya, you said it really beautifully. It's very important to for us as parents to stand up for our children and accept them for who they are, and support them and love them. And if and they have us as support and backup, nobody can say anything. And so I totally agree with you. I think that when we have people in our families, and we are supportive of LGBTQ people in our families, and we speak about it openly, we'll notice that other people can't stand up and poke fun of you at you or tease you in school because you have somebody really strong backing you up.
Absolutely. No, I did want a message from both of you, to the moms who are watching. And I think this really sums it up beautifully, that at the end of the day, what do we need to do? We just need to love the way we're loving, continue to love, can continue to help. It's quite interesting. In our previous episodes, like I mentioned, we had spoken with parents of kids who've come out, with an alternative gender or sexual orientation, and they talk about their own journey, and they talk about how it took them a while, because these are hardened social constructs in our heads, and it took them a while. But as soon as they understood that it doesn't really matter, they were the ones who were champions for their children, and they've become allies. And now you mentioned that there is yet a beautiful new generation who's doing just that, and that's a new perspective for me. I never thought about that. But your children are going to be super champions because they are comfortable. They have grown up in an environment where they've not known any kind of prejudice. I remember the statement that you're born with love that comes naturally. You're born with all kinds of other positive emotions. Hate, you learn to hate. But there is going to be a generation who's not learned to hate, and there couldn't be anything more beautiful than that. I did have one question, which is really in continuation with this conversation. What are your pet peeves? What do you detest people saying to you or saying about you, in front of you, behind you? Maybe portrayal in the media, maybe portrayal by news channels. And what is the thing that hurts and upsets you the most? Aditya, let's start with you.
I don't really have anything like that, but people think I'm the
Okay.
grandfather of the children, though that is could be true because that's my age. So they think we're the which I'm fine. I just say we just skipped the children generation. We had grandchildren directly, and so so that's fine. I don't really have a pet peeve like that. I just, I guess I've just had thick skin or something. I don't know what to say. Sonali?
No,
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
I I think I do have a couple, and I think one is that a lot of parents will say, or be a good boy or be a good girl, or have you been a good boy or have you been a good girl, or if they do something they're saying, oh, you're being a good boy. And I think for me, this, I had actually learned this from another parent, and I remember saying this to a child, to these young girls, saying, oh, you're being such good girls. And they pulled me aside and they said, please don't say that to our child. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And they said, we believe that all children are good, and sometimes there are people, children will behave badly, but innately everybody is good. And so don't say this line of like, oh, are you a good boy, or you're being a good girl, or you're being a bad girl, because we believe that every child is good. And so please don't say that. And so I really took that to heart, and I remember holding it with me. I still think about that comment that I made, and how much I learned from it, this idea that everybody is good, and sometimes children will behave badly, which is very different, separating behavior from who the individual
Yeah.
is. The other thing also I find, that is a pet peeve for me, is people will say, oh, boys don't cry, and stop young boys from crying and expressing their emotions. And for me, I feel like human beings are human beings, and of course, boys cry and girls cry and everybody cries. And it's okay for us to have those feelings, and for us to sort of, you know, burden boys, but especially young boys, to not express their emotions is really this sort of awful societal pressure. And we should be open to all human beings, whether you're a boy or a girl, or gender non-conforming. As human beings, we should all be allowed to express our feelings. And when my child cries, I'm always like, I empathize with him, and I say, I know this feels awful right now. I know exactly how you're feeling, and I empath. It's like, if for instance, if you yourself, if you're stuck in a traffic jam and you call a friend and you say, I'm stuck in a traffic jam, I'm really mad at myself for like taking this road, and your friend says, yeah, why didn't you listen to me, and you should have gone the other way. It's really frustrating for someone to say that, and to hear someone say that. Whereas if someone says, oh my gosh, I know exactly how you feel, I've been on that, I know, I've been on that same Gurgaon Delhi road, I've also been stuck in there for 2 hours, and you
Yeah.
hear that empathetic voice, you actually feel better. And so I think it's really, for me, those are my pet peeves, is like, this way in which we impose how people should feel and think and behave, and the way that we judge people. And so I think my wish is for us to not be as judgmental, to treat each other with empathy, and to really listen to our children, because they surprise you. Rohan surprised me a few weeks ago. He was asked to do an assignment for class, and the teacher said, please write a public service, something good, some good thing that people should do. And he wrote this essay, and he said, love is love. And that was, it was so beautifully written. And he wrote about the history of how there was a time when gay people were not, and like, it was, I don't know how, like, he did his own research, and he wrote this beautiful essay about how it's okay to love anybody who you want to love. It's just love, you know
I
It's
could
like
just
I said,
add.
the new
That's
champions.
beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to just add one. I did think of a
Yes.
pet peeve actually. One is that in Indian families, there's this whole "जब तेरी शादी होगी, जब तेरा दूल्हा आएगा."
Oh,
बचपन से we start
of
talking
course.
about the issue, the child get. I find myself getting into myself. And so you start imagining your child getting married at a very young age, and the pressure on the gay child begins at that moment when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. They begin, the parents have this expectation that they're going to get married. And so I really want to send this message to your viewers that don't keep bringing up the subject of marriage with your children, and especially the idea of marriage. It was like traumatized me when people talked
Yeah.
about marriage, and they keep doing it till you die. And they'll, however so old the person, they'll, and in the 20s, the pressure they put on their children to get married, the boys. I'm on gay groups where people are just like constantly having to go and see girls. They don't really want to. They keep telling the parents, I don't really want to get married, and they still say their haath pair bandh denge, things like that, silly ideas like that. And so, don't at the young age, and all those, Bollywood is terrible. I hate
Oh
Bollywood.
yes.
And
Oh
it
yes.
starts this all of Bollywood is based on marriage. And all the songs on marriage and who's going to get married and when they're going to get married. And there's all Dula Dulan ke jo gaane hain. Avoid singing them to your children. Avoid bringing up the whole subject. Avoid going to marriages. In fact, when I got married, I was refusing to go to a marriage. When my mother said, I said, I'm never going to get married. Why do I have to keep going to these endless marriages? India is just one series of marriages after the other. I said, I'm never going to get married. No one will come to mind. She said, why not? You should have a marriage. You should get married. That's how the idea came up. And so I think, I would just entreat people, don't bring up the marriage topic in your families. Please
And
avoid
especially
it.
don't make it the mainstay of your life. Don't make it like out to be
एंड
the
जस्ट जब
ultimate
जब
goal.
उसके साथ खेल रहे हो बच्चे के साथ उस वक्त
हाँ.
तुम उसको ना उसको वो चुन्नी पहना देंगे देन दिल से ओ यू लुकिंग लाइक अ दुल्हन यू लुकिंग सो ब्राइडी ब्राइडी यू सो क्यूट कभी उसके वो मेहंदी कर दी so they start prepping the child. I would think the current word is grooming. They start
Oh, yeah.
grooming the child to do what they want at a very young age, and they make them dress in a certain way and talk in a certain way. These are terrible pressures on children, gay children. Now, if you want to be sympathetic to your children, I hope you do want to be, then don't put on this pressure of marriage on them. Please avoid it. That is my pet peeve.
No, I think it's a good one. It's a good peeve to have for sure. Well, there is so much more we can discuss, but I understand you're both pressed for time, and we have woken Sonali up in the middle of a night, actually early in the morning. So I will end here. I will end this session here, and thank you so much to all the viewers for watching. Neeru, Radhika, Anjali, Khushi, Radhi, Himani. I'm sorry I've not been able to read all of your comments. Himani has enjoyed the session. Shimona has, of course. Neeru Bansal also. Kavita Krishnamurti has something more to say. She says absolutely awesome information being discussed. I'm sure this video will reach thousands and spread more awareness. Yes, absolutely. And we call upon all our viewers to make sure it reaches all those thousands and millions, because it really does need to. So please share. Please forward this to as many people as you can in all your circles, especially the parenting circles. I think we're the ones who need to see it first. And here's to another fabulous generation of sensitized human beings. And thank you for raising them. Thank you so much, Aditya and Sonali, for joining us today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us. Appreciate you having this show. I'm really appreciative that you made this effort to reach out to us and to create a show like this. That your thanks to you, kudos to you for setting this up and creating the platform for us to be able to express ourselves.
Yes. Absolutely our pleasure. Like we said, Let's Talk is a platform where we need to have some more conversations which are normally just, swept under the carpet and stuff like that. So as long as we can keep talking and have more perspectives from people like you, things will get normalized. Even all these, the ideas which seem taboo or unnatural to us will just very soon seem everyday and commonplace. So that's what we're aiming at, and that's the intention. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thanks everyone for watching us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.